Hello and welcome to the Advanced Age Role-Playing Gamers podcast. I'm Nathan, I'm your host, and I've got with me tonight a different interviewer with me for our Between Two GMs segment. Say hello, Tier.
Hi, Tier. That's what Matt always says.
Yeah, Matt always says that. So yeah, that's a pretty good approximation of...
He does. He's a very polite and formal man.
Usually with a middle finger.
Yeah, until he passes out on the couch.
Hi, Tier. We like to make Tier feel welcome. So Tier's first time interviewing with us, but he's a smart guy, and I'm sure he won't screw it up.
And now
right,
the pressure is really on.
Yeah,
he does. I bet he knows the editor.
This is why Nathan does not go to the track and does not bet on anything.
Right. So we've got Lewanika, Josh, and Glenn with us again. Tabletop Journeys. You may recognize them from podcasts called Tabletop Journeys, and possibly a Kickstarter that we talked about last time they were on.
Yeah.
So guys, just if you could just go around the table and just introduce yourselves real quick, and we'll start with Glenn this time.
Oh, cool. Hi, I'm Glenn Myers. I'm one of the hosts of Tabletop Journeys. Excited to be here, excited to be talking about Kickstarters. And recently, well, all right, not that recently. Short version is I recently realized that I qualify 100% for AARPG at this point based on my most recent birthday.
Yeah.
I could apply for regular AARP as well. Don't laugh, Lewanika, because you're older than me.
I'm just saying.
I see you pointing and laughing over there, but I mean that's just ludicrous, my friend.
It's literally the pot calling the kettle black. I'll leave that joke as it is.
What could he mean?
I'm wearing a black shirt. That's pretty much where that comes
let's
from.
go, Lewanika.
Hey, hi, I'm Lewanika. I'm one of the three hosts of Tabletop Journeys, and I edit for the podcast. I write for our content. I do crazy, funny voices when I run games at the table, and I just love visiting other podcasts. Our podcast family in general is really awesome, diverse ages, races, creeds, types, dispositions, all of those things. And I think it's amazing that we've, in the short time that we've been doing this, just over 3 years, nearly 3 years completed, about to roll into our fourth year here very soon. We have amassed a great group of good friends in the content creation podcast part of the industry, part of the hobby. No signs of slowing down. This is just an amazing opportunity to kick back and once again meet with some good friends and yap a little bit for the audience to hear.
We love to yap.
We do. We're big yappy. We're
Yeah.
pretty much
Speaking of yappy, why don't we go with Josh?
Okay. Yeah, so I'm Josh Newton. I'm the third leg of the stool, as they say. And hopefully my video is not too crappy here. I'm getting a lot of lag on my side.
He said stool.
Hopefully it's all working out here. But yeah, really excited to be talking tonight. Yeah, just really excited to be here. Happy to be doing the circuit. Happy to be back. Nice to see you all again. So
thanks again for coming back on. It's nice to see you guys again. Tier, thanks for volunteering for this.
Hey, I was just talking to these guys before we started. They got a new convert this week because I started listening to their podcast. Started all the way back over 3 years ago. Started jumping through. Got the introductory episodes. Got to the Christmas buying episodes. the holiday buying episodes. Then started really focusing down on some of their content that I really enjoyed as both a player and a storyteller. I absolutely love it, and I can't wait to hear more.
Awesome.
That's very nice of you to say.
Yeah, that really makes us feel great because we look back at our history, and we, of course, as all podcasters do, really fret about those early episodes. Sound quality wasn't right where it needs to be.
They were a little rough.
We weren't very polished. There's all kinds of things, like we've learned tricks with editing. We've learned to actually edit. All these wonderful things that we do now, and we're like, but at the same time, we have always felt that we have had a 3-year history of very strong episodes, and some of my favorite episodes are in those early 6 to 7 months.
Sure.
I love, even though we were not good at fine tuning our process, so it's a bit of a longer one. But our backgrounds, which ended up being 2 parts, I loved those episodes because it's like we started with the things that we always wanted to talk about. We have not yet finished the things we all have always wanted to talk about, but we definitely hit some of the big ticket items very early. So much so that there are some things that we might update, revisit with new tools, new techniques that we want to bring to the table, things we talk about all the time. Because, when you get to be persons of a vintage disposition, that's my new phrase, by the way. I coined it earlier this week somewhere.
Old folk heard.
TM.
Yeah, right. Whether you carry the card, lord over people that you haven't gotten the card yet or not, when you get to a certain point, you are still learning things. If you're doing this life thing correctly, you're always learning. You're always working on building your core, whether it be your game or whatever you do in life. You're always improving your process. So there are things that we absolutely stand by everything we've done in the past, but there are things we have new techniques for. There are things that we can talk about, new examples, newer games that we can apply some of the older techniques to that we never had or never knew about. Things we talked about in the past are actually in games that we are now playing. That's pretty awesome. So I love the fact that somebody has gone back, looked at that old catalog, listened to that old catalog, and let us know that we were on the right track all along. It means so much. Thank you.
And think about this too, that if you're going all the way back to the beginning, you have something like 600 hours of content to go. So settle in.
It just seems crazy. Standing on this side of it, it seems crazy that we have that much of a backlog.
Think about that. Yeah, we're putting out we're putting out episode 140 this week, but that does not include all of the actual plays, because we do 2 episodes a week. We do an actual play on Tuesdays, and we do regular discussion episodes on Friday. So we're putting out our 140th episode, but that doesn't count all the actual plays that we've done on the other side. So
right. Yeah, we're coming up on 100 actual play episodes, not including the live stuff, but it's like maybe 160, 170 some odd YouTube videos total.
Yeah.
But we're like an every other week kind of place.
Yeah. and you know what you said earlier about how when you start to where you are now, how things have progressed and how things have changed, even just so much in in audio, video. What we had discussed when we started the podcast is we were going to record one game, one actual play, and we weren't going to use it, and then we were going to start the podcast. Well, these jokers decided, no, we'll just put this one out first. I'm like, oh no, why would you do that?
So to Lee Winika's point is like that old stuff is just so good. The audio was terrible. Let's at least for us for the first 3 or 4 episodes.
Yeah.
But the game was so good. Like I was running, and Tyr had like the best interpretation of a pre-written character that I've seen in a long time. PFC Hammer from the Alien Destroyer of Worlds campaign. Nice. He's the only hammer I'll ever take. But anyway, that's
and then to bring it around, now we're 140 episodes deep, and I am running the next Arcane campaign. That's what's going on with us right now, and I feel so different just from the experience and what I've learned in the community, and I love it, and it's a wonderful place to be.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna have to talk Aliens, because I know when we played Chariot of the Gods, I took the pre-generated character of
Lerone.
Lerone, and I just remember I remember saying, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? And then I honestly thought of my battle buddy when I was in basic training, who's from Shreveport, Louisiana, and I came up with this mixed accent that was a combination. I used all the phrases from my battle buddy, and then I used the kind of voice and pacing of speech that my godmother's father, who we affectionately called Big Daddy, and my godmother's mother we called Big Mama, because they were from somewhere in the Deep South, I believe Georgia. And I remember just, I'm going to talk like him, but try to sound a little bit more understandable. Like I basically used all of his ways of speaking and mannerisms as I was acting out the character, but then I just made sure I enunciated just a wee bit better so people could actually hear me. Because what I remember about Big Daddy is, as much as I loved him and he was awesome to me, like a big hero of mine when I was a kid, is the fact that I never knew a word he said. Like whether it was because he had a cigarette hanging out of his mouth or he had a face full of pumpkin pie. I don't know what it was, but it was, and usually both. Like all I remember was stuff like, you know, don't you sit on the concrete like that, you know, and that. So like it was like, okay, how can I do that, but actually make it so people can understand the words I'm saying? And I found it was magic. It was a moment where I just found it, put it together, and I had a blast.
It truly was. I swear your best RPG performance in terms of a characterization that I've ever seen you do. Just, you know, to give you full honor on that one.
I want to give a little credit to the Andrew Gasca and those folks who wrote the games. They did really well in fleshing out those pre-gens for all the games I've read so far. They give you enough hooks in there and some ideas of coming up with something, and enough where like your version of that Lewanika, of that character is going to be completely different than everybody else's, but still like true to that character. So I that to me is like a nice, good game design. So.
Absolutely brilliant game design. So many kudos go to them. The other thing that we did with that, to kind of talk about one of our very first TTJ book, was collaborative world building. Josh, who ran that game for us, did a collaborative world building session right at the beginning of that. So and what he basically did was we rolled on this, or he had us talk about a story. Like basically, I want you to tell me the story about your big phobia. And so we had to create on the spot our character's phobia, knowing full well that we are literally handing the storyteller exactly what he's going to use against us.
Mother,
We had to make it work. And I remember, as I don't think I went first. I want to say I don't think I went last either, but whoever went before me, I
isolated you. I isolated you too.
Yeah.
You didn't do it in front of everybody else. And so like we had like a big room and I pulled them all out individually, did their phobia, and then put them back in the room. So none of you knew what each other's phobia was, for one. I knew. Yeah. And then it was when we did the episode that we bridged it all together and finally revealed all the secrets, because of course one of you was a turncoat, right? And so like, you know, so there's a whole bunch of like secrets between you all that none of you really knew about until we put the episode out. None of you knew them until we put the episode out, except for me.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I just remember that in that moment, that all I was thinking about, and it was probably because I had just watched it recently, was Robert Shaw's speech in Jaws with the Indianapolis. Yep. So here I am playing this character who's like a roughneck effectively. And I'm like, I'm a roughneck from Louisiana. I don't have sharks. I don't have the Indianapolis, but let's talk about gators. So I literally talked about being treed by this massive gator attack and how it wiped out all the people I was with. And I was the only one left. So, and so I used this combination of that and elements from the original Predator film to kind of inform the performance and the story, and just played up that fear of gators or whatever. And then it was awesome. I mean, I don't want to give it away because I really want people to go back and listen to those episodes that we have.
Well, Tier's listening to it soon. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
Tier will get to it soon. But I'm telling you, probably some of the funnest stuff I've done at a game table in my life. It was something.
That's awesome.
Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and when you're like talking about like phobias and things like that, it's good to have like a good relationship with your GM. So you can kind of trust them to hand them those keys and that control and say, okay, you know, I'm going to give you all this power, and I know you're going to use it responsibly, and it's going to be fun, and it's, you know, and in horror games, bad things are going to happen.
Right.
So you have to kind of give away a little bit of that freedom and trust that even if you die, it's going to be pretty magnificent.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. Going into a game like Aliens, just expect to die.
Yeah.
Expect it from the get go. Don't plan on being, I've got to be the one that survives, because you probably won't.
I had no illusions about whether or not I was going to be the final girl. Like, no illusions. Like, in fact, I don't want to say much more because it'll give it away. But there's a scene where I was pretty confident this was it, and when you listen to it, you'll know that scene. That's what I'm saying.
I'm really looking forward because I wound up on the unexpected end of an Aliens campaign and went, how did this happen? But it all worked out. It made a great story.
Yeah.
Super fun stuff. So last time you guys were here, you were doing a Kickstarter for multiverse. Was it subclasses?
Yeah.
Heroic subclasses of the multiverse.
Ooh, sorry. I was like coming at it from backwards and flipped it around. Yeah. Subclasses multiverse. So that was successful.
Yes,
it was.
Yeah.
Very happy. Yeah.
Yeah. So
300% funded, something like that. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It actually funded in the first 72 hours. So to everybody listening, we're putting it out to you. There's a record to beat now.
And thank you for your support from the last time we were on the show when we were talking about that Kickstarter, because the people that we're talking to and your contributions is what made it possible. So thank you very much.
Yeah. I just help you kind of maybe reach some folks that you may not reach on a normal basis, and hopefully they like what you do, and if they like enough, then they'll support you. So that's
absolutely. Well, they came out the last time, and we're here to talk. We'll talk a little bit about the past project, but we'll get to the new project and good stuff.
Yeah, and that's kind of the nice thing about having a podcast like ours is. We talk to like Free League and Chaosium and those folks like that, but we get to talk to who we want to talk to because, we don't have any stake in the game other than we're having fun talking to people that we like. So you're on our good list. So let's keep it that way, guys.
Thank you.
So, but like you guys, you have good energy. We have fun talking. So, and that's what it comes down to. I think when we had the Opti for his Subversion camp on is support your friends, and that's what it comes down to. If you like the person and like their general vibe, it doesn't hurt to just throw a couple bucks their way and give them some support. So
absolutely,
or, record a podcast and spend hours editing and.
It's all about your level of commitment, guys.
Exactly.
Double down.
Hey, I'm going to help out, and there's totally crazy, which is where all of us in this current virtual room land.
So, and I've heard a lot too that with Kickstarters, really those first 48 to 72 hours are super important, because once that passes, that initial excitement, I think it becomes a lot harder to hit those targets and those stretch goals. So
very much so. Yeah.
So getting the word out early and getting folks to check it out ahead of time is super important. So best of luck with that.
It really is. Yeah, I mean, it really is. I mean, I actually witnessed just about a week ago, kind of an unseen kind of anomaly where there was a Kickstarter campaign. I was talking about it with Glenn and Lewanika on our kind of shared chat as it was happening. But it was a Kickstarter campaign that I had backed early, but within the last 2 hours, they were like a couple $100 away from funding. And I was like talking to them on X also. They were like, we don't know if it's going to fund or not. I'm like, well, what can we do? How can I help? Like, just like send tweets, send blue sky messages, send whatever to whoever will listen, kind of thing. But I was like, guys, I gotta be honest. If it's like within the last 2 hours and we're that close to funding, I'm going to be awful. I'm going to be the worst person in the world, except for, cause like I'm going to be sitting on nails. It'll be awful. And so, hopefully we're not in that, but hopefully we fund in the first 72 hours and we can spend the last 3 weeks of our campaign filling out stretch goals and everything like that, like we did it the last time around. And so
right, that would
if you want to see me unbearable,
that would be glorious.
Yeah,
Because it would be terrible to be sitting there right on the edge like that. Oh,
yeah.
Can't even
yeah, no, I feel bad. Like I've seen some that where people had some pretty lofty goals, and I'd speak to some folks like on Reddit or whatever, and I'd like kind of see what they're doing. It's like, well, it's your target's kind of high, and like what's the value proposition here, like, and they have like a nice, like the start of an idea, but really wasn't ready for Kickstarter yet. They didn't have it kind of narrowed in and didn't have their messaging right, which I think there are folks, like I've got a friend Mitch who helps folks out with that. But there's a lot of people, a lot of very creative people in the whole TTRPG community, but that doesn't mean that what you are making is that you're going to
translate.
Be good. Yeah, not going to translate, and it may be wonderful, but if you don't know how to build the messaging around it, it's not going to go anywhere. You have to kind of play a little bit of the marketing game, and you got to. If you can't do everything, then you need to get somebody to help you out to bring your dream to life.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we talk about a lot amongst ourselves, and I try to share with folks, certainly when I talk to people in my day-to-day muggle life, going to the 9-to-5 job and all that, is what we do is art. It is an art form. Kickstarter is a weird combination of art and science. And the science is that marketing piece. It is that how do you take your art to get it to as many eyeballs as necessary, knowing that a percentage of those eyeballs are the ones that will support your art, right?
Yeah.
So the mechanism to do that, the cost versus value proposition that's involved in that is very mechanical. It's very science. It's very sales. And one of the things that we are blessed with is the fact that we are a team. So we each have our own individual strengths, weaknesses. I remain in a sales type position. I work for a sales organization. So there are some things that I do. I have very good friends in marketing, so I can lean on them for ideas. I can, in some cases, just see what they do for their side gigs and just mirror that in our own TTRPG method. So these are the types of things, what is it that Josh is always reminding us, good artists borrow, or good musicians borrow, great musicians steal.
Exactly.
There's a lot of that to it, but it's about the team. No one person, unless this is their full-time gig, can do all of any piece of this. And so
let's be honest,
we have to split that up.
Even if it is their full-time gig, with all of the things that we are doing to run our podcast, put out as many episodes as we do a week, and create the content that we do, one person wouldn't have enough hours to do it on their own. They would have to get partners. They would have to
farmed out,
to find more, even if that means outsourcing to, as an example, for Kickstarters, one of the biggest outsources is going to be art for us, because while all of us have a lot of talent, none of us are an established full-on graphic designer. So that's something that we would have to outsource. So if someone out there is just a small operation or a one-person operation, they need to find people to collaborate with if they're struggling, because you're not wrong. And Lewanik is 100% right. The way that the three of us complement each other, we're insanely lucky when it comes to creating content. And the way that we go through our creation process, and the way all three of us will wind up having hand in it by the time it's done, but each one of us brought something else to it that makes it shine that much more. So I'm really proud of the work that we do, and I'm really glad to have the team that I have.
It shows.
Yeah, there's a lot in with these things, and there are it's a different discipline to do the content stuff that appears in our Kickstarters than to do the podcast. Our podcast is idea food. It's conversations, it's meeting people, talking with people. They form the ideas that lead into what we put down on paper and put out in our Kickstarters and in our various books and various projects. But that plus some of the games we run, whether it be with our Patreons or actual plays that we produce for the show, or home games, or some combination thereof. For me, a lot of my ideas come from this weird thing where I'm pretty much an insomniac, not particularly diagnosed, but I just don't sleep well. So I am pretty consistently watching a ludicrous sum of YouTube videos. So, but the YouTube videos I tend to focus on with when they're not music in nature, and reaction videos, which I love, is very much on historical things, whether it be Roman history or whatever, and science things. The Space Race is one of my favorite current YouTube channels because they're nice little 10-minute blurbs about some element of what's going on to get people successfully to the moon and Mars missions and so on and so forth, or about what the various telescopes and the various missions within our solar system are all about, and learning about the different planets. And I love that science stuff. I will frequently, at least once a day, watch something by Neil deGrasse Tyson, because there's always something that these guys are saying that edifies my mind in a way that at some point turns into something I'm writing later on. Maybe not in that moment, but there's very little that I read, view constantly that doesn't show up at some point. So I'm always taking and processing these things through my head and saying, okay, that's really cool. What's the story behind this cool event? Or what's the story behind this cool thing you see? And then what we end up with, when, at least from the piece of the writing that I do, is that cool story that could create this cool thing that we saw. So it's like, what's the piece behind that? And I think of the games at the table as players getting to the cool thing by doing cooler things. And that's what I'm trying to create with the work that I did.
So what's more satisfying to you? Is it running the game, writing the background, or being a player? If you had to kind of focus on one of those things, because you do a lot of performance stuff, you're writing these backgrounds for other products that you guys have done, but sometimes it's some people like they want to be the forever GM. What's the most exciting for you, if you had to choose?
I'll let the other guys answer, and then I'll throw mine in last. How's that?
Let's go with Josh first.
Sure. Yeah. So for me, honestly, it's the writing. Like, it is the idea creation and the idea generation. I just love sitting down with a concept or one little thought, and just like sticking my finger in that little nugget of an idea and seeing how far I can go ahead and get it to spread. I mean, that's the most amazing thing for me, right? Like, that's it's been, we're doing kind of the preliminary writing for the next Kickstarter now, and we all kind of came up with like these little paragraph long blurbs to go ahead and say, okay, this is what we think this organization or this faction is going to be, right? 3-4 sentences, stuff like that. And that's kind of what we all decided based on those 3 or 4 sentences, what's going to be in the book and what's not going to be in the book. And then once we kind of decided the main content, then we went back to go ahead and start writing. And the first one that I did, I took that 3 or 4 sentence idea, and it's like 15 pages now. So, like, that's the kind of stuff that I love, is kind of going so deep into the writing trance that you're just kind of like exploring every angle of this idea and letting kind of the narrative take you wherever it's going to go. When I was so my master's is in music, actually, is in composition. And the same kind of thing would happen when I was writing. Like, I'd get up at, at the time my son was very, very young, and 7, 8 years old. And so I'd get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and until he got up around 7 or 8, that was my writing time. And it was like, and the house was dark and the house was quiet, and, it's in the middle of nowhere. So the house was cold in the winter and stuff like that. And just kind of like getting into it and kind of into that narrative trance as you're kind of exploring those ideas, and then kind of sitting back and seeing what you've got, what actually came out of it. That's kind of the best part, is like, where did my mind and my hand actually go when I was exploring this? And that's been the best part for me.
I find that editing is my Zen time, so I can kind of relate to the composition piece.
Don't try to steal him. Don't try to steal him.
Glenn, how about you?
For myself, Josh is pretty much hitting right along a lot of the same strokes that I do. I call myself a maker. I like to create things. It doesn't really matter which aspect of it is. what I like is taking that idea, that seed, and helping it grow into something, and being like, at the end of it, looking at it and going, wow, holy crap, I made that. And it could be anything from writing a module, creating a character, doing a subclass, making a spreadsheet to track mileage for the RV that we live in. If I'm making it and it's turning into something, I'm having a good time. And that applies to all three, not to try to cheat the question, but if I had to pick one of the three categories between running, playing, and writing, I would also probably, I couldn't, because when I play, I write. When I run, I write. So I guess write has to be the answer, because as a storyteller, I have to write. As a player, I have to write. And as a writer, I have to write. So yeah.
That's what I took away from one of your earliest episodes when I was listening, is when you were talking about, are you a game master? Are you a DM? Are you a GM? And when you went, no, we're storytellers. Everyone writes part of the story. The players write it. The storyteller provides the framework and the necessary background or clues, and the players write the rest of the story, and you're all involved in the creation process. And I took that from you all this week, and it's one of the greatest portions of your podcast. I loved it.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
That's a term that we stole from another game too. Yeah. So.
Yeah, we stole that from Vampire the Masquerade.
But and it just resonated as soon as we all heard it.
Yeah, it has always resonated with us. We've been using it ever since. And I think in that episode, we really fine-tuned our beliefs in that, because there's a lot of back and forth on the internet. There's different people. There's great content creators who will die on a hill saying, you are not a storyteller, and with great deference to Dungeon Craft and Professor Dungeon Master, who I love watching his shorts, right? But I absolutely disagree with that. But I have also listened to his full dissertation on the topic, and he's absolutely correct as he defines the word storyteller to be. As a GM, as a storyteller, I am not that thing that he's defining. We have created our own definition of what storyteller means to us, for us at our table. We invite other people to take that particular definition and use that as a catch-all, because it's system agnostic and works. And, no small part of this, I don't want to be anybody's master. It's not my goal. I don't have a pet now, but I have in the past. And when I do in the future, I'm not even that pet's master. I just happen to be the person who's responsible for making sure they have food, right? I am not somebody's master, and don't ever want to be called that. I don't like that term.
And there's been a big shift away from that term for a while, with Mother for Alien, Keeper for the Lore Keeper, which is just substituted to Keeper for Monster of the Week. That has been moving away from. So a lot of us felt that way, just to support what you're saying.
Absolutely. But at the end of the day, I feel strongly about storyteller because I believe in the one of the oldest traditions of humankind, which is just that: telling stories, sharing experiences, whether it is at a campfire and a circle of stones, or on some streaming channel or whatever. So it is sharing an experience or telling a tale that people can join in on. And a communal storyteller, very much like Stone Soup, a good friend of mine, Michael Desmuke and Jim Johnson, were talking about the story of Stone Soup. Their version of it is a bit different than the one I grew up with, but it was the idea that a village was starving. Nobody had food to feed enough people. So one person said, well, I've got this great soup that can make, and basically had a pot of water, was boiling it, and put a stone in it. It's called Stone Soup. It's so great. And sat over this thing and just sipped it. And, it's so good. And it's just missing a little something. And he mentioned it. And so I was like, I think I have some of that. So all of a sudden one person did it. And then, it's so much better. And then he kept coming up with new things to add to this soup. And before long, the whole village had added to this, and then they fed the village. And that's a story I learned, or I first heard, probably in kindergarten or first grade.
Yeah.
And I think those of us of vintage disposition probably got the book version in our elementary school years at some point. But I
think yours was on a stone tablet, Lewinika.
Yeah, probably. It was etched. It's still there. It's on the side of a mountain. It's, It's right next to Kilroy Was Here. But, but at the end of the day, that says a lot about the tabletop experience. What I do as a storyteller, what is I provide the pot, the water, and the stone. Every player is adding that other ingredient to make this great thing that we all dine on for however long the game lasts and our memories last after that. And I think that works for me. That's how I view it. If I were to pick my favorite, because I would say creation, because we are creating the entire time. The only time creation stops in what we do here is when I'm finished editing and when Josh finishes final processing. We are literally, especially for the games we air, we are literally changing, altering, and creating the story until the moment we hit the button that releases that story. And at that point, every time we talk about that story, we are still creating that story. We are still expanding that myth. We are still doing that thing that 1,000 years from now, if they only got a little niblet of what we've done, one could only hope would be the next story of Perseus and Medusa. That's kind of my thing. I'm always looking for that. I'm like, what's the story that's going to last? What's the tale I'm going to be telling? What's the tale that a player at my table is going to say, I remember when 20 years from now? I talk about all the time on our show, a game we played or a session we played or a moment 30, 40 years ago. I can't remember a phone number. If you gave me a phone number right now, I would forget it in 3 minutes. But I can sure tell you about the first time I had a character that walked into Waterdeep with a bunch of characters and we basically decided we would form a protection racket. A security business. I can tell you about nearly every story we had with some level of incorrectness because, time. But I remember that better than I would remember a phone number that somebody gave me today.
Well, besides, it's more fun to embellish them.
Yeah. That fish was this big.
Yeah.
This big.
This big.
Yeah, this big. Honestly, it was a guppy, but it had big teeth.
That's the biggest thing I learned about fishing is hold your arms out towards the camera and give that illusion.
What I've learned about fishing is if you lean back, it looks like it's heavier. Just act like you're straining to lift it. No matter what size it is, it's much heavier than it looks.
Yeah.
That's a good one to take forward.
We got some fishing.
That was an epic Luanica rant I will add too. Like that was impressive.
That was a pretty good one.
That was good. That was a good one. Yeah.
He's on fire this evening. or slow burning, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we've got the fire started, and now it's kind of going full roar now. Lessons learned from the first Kickstarter. Should I do a round robin again?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. How about Josh? We'll start with you again. Big lessons learned from the last Kickstarter.
Boy. Lessons learned. You know what? I think the biggest lesson that I learned was not actually during the campaign, but after the campaign. It was about being honest with your backers about when things are coming and what your timeline is. Like, we had every intention. So that campaign ran like September until early October last year. And we had every intention of having that book out by the end of the year, right around the time my wife was about to give birth to my beautiful daughter. And we were hoping to go ahead and have the book out by the time my daughter was born. That did not wind up happening. It didn't wind up coming out until about April. And, honestly, and it was a better product for it, right? If we had really tried to cram it together and put it out in December, it would not have been as good as it was when it came out in April, because it was right around December that, we'd written all the subclasses and we got them all together and everything. And we're like, you know what, we should play test these just to go ahead and make sure that they're actually, that they translate to the table well, right? And when we play tested, we learned a lot about how to write subclasses by giving them to other people and having them break them for us, because break them they did. The book became better when we gave that time to get it right. And being communicative about that, I think, is what allowed us to go ahead and keep our backers happy and everything like that. Like, everybody understood that these things happen, but being communicative about that was really a big deal.
Lee Winicki, you had something to say?
I was just going to say, we had done some playtesting. A couple of the classes had actually been used in home games for a while at that point. But what we determined is we need more robust playtesting. That's when we developed a playtest system where
we got serious about it.
Yeah, all of the subclasses were tested at very specific levels with identical encounter scenarios. Play tested through multiple playtest partners. We got a cadre of somewhere between 12 and 15 all in playtesters, all from the TTRPG podcast community to come in and playtest these games robustly and really put them through their paces, break the spokes, and see what came out of it. So it was. We had done playtesting to get them to where they were. What we really determined was if you're going to do subclasses, you need robust playtesting. I have a little forgiveness for all the companies that are out there doing playtesting and all the minor gripes that we in the community have, because having gone through what we went through, I know how difficult it is. If I have a gripe with them, I don't know if putting it out the way they have is the kind of robustness that they need, because I don't know if it's I don't think some of the playtesting is similar enough to put a scientific method to it. And that's kind of what we did. We put a scientific method. You can't test a theory unless you're retesting the exact same parameters with a different thing. And does this work? And that's how we created balance within the subclasses. That's how we knew they balanced against other things in the game. Is we took these scenarios, all were scenarios we created, and just put them through their paces. And then resisted the urge to change the scenarios simply because we needed them to be the same. Following that, we changed the scenarios and have used those for other projects that we've done. But during the test, no matter the scenario stayed identical, we just tested different characters, different players at different times.
Glenn, you have anything to add, or?
Sure. So to the original question of lessons learned, everything takes longer than you think it will. It's short and it's simple, but everything from getting art back to final editing to honestly just all of us going through the same document and reviewing it around our own schedules, everything's going to take longer than you think it will. And as we move into our next Kickstarter, that lesson has informed our planning so much. And I mean, I'm not going to say everything's going to be, I'm not going to curse this by saying everything's going to be smooth and go off without a hitch, knocking on wood.
You don't see. Yeah.
I knocked on wood. But we did learn so many of those lessons that I know this project, everything's going to run smoother and smoother, not completely smooth. I'm just saying smoother, Josh Call. And we're going to put out a better product in a more timely fashion. Yeah. Not saying we're going to get it out on time, but it will be closer to on time than the last one was.
I think the other thing, if I can, that we kind of learned just kind of in general, sorry, just to go ahead and load on one thing. I think the model for how we did our Kickstarter worked really well last time, is that we kind of came up with a base offering and then we tied all of our stretch goals to making the book bigger and better. So like everybody knew what they were going to get, and the more people that backed, just the better it got. And we're going to be following that model again this time around. So hoping that it works this time too.
I would say what I learned is about organization or more organizational things. Part of that is in the planning and the timetables and making sure that we are being more diligent about our timetables. Just because something can be done in 3 days doesn't mean it's going to be done in 3 days. You have to allow for a day of calamity, a day of recovery, or whatever. So, things that we thought might get done in 3 days are probably more accurately 6 days. Those types of things. And, extrapolating that out, we're not saying it's going to take us 15 years to get this done. By no means will it take us that long. But one of the things that was very important to when we got going on this project is we before we even started working on our preliminary Kickstarter page and starting asking people to follow the project, was we had to get our writing to a higher degree of doneness than we did on the previous Kickstarter. So we are much further along in our process. When we did the last project, we knew what we were doing. We had a lot of our ideas down. I would say far less than first or rough draft, but they were still largely mostly ideas. Even though there were subclasses, elements had been play tested, but nothing had been completed at that point. I think there's one that was actually in a complete form at the time the Kickstarter launched, and we were basically working as we went. To contrast that, we are right now looking at early rough drafts, far from first draft, but we have rough drafts on nearly everything that's in the core offering of this project. And there are notes and rough drafts, nearly first drafts on many of the stretch goals, in fact. So completion is going to be, I think I bumped a button that I didn't mean to there. Completion on this project, it should in theory be much easier because we are further along when we start. And I think that's an important factor to the level of commitment we have to, one, meeting or beating our timetables, as well as producing better content. And part of that is necessity. We are doing much more original commissioned art in this project than we have ever done before. And so in order to do that, we had to have much more complete information and ideas so artists could go out there and produce artwork that matches what we're doing. We are literally at the point where we're seeing draft sketches and first draft sketches in a few areas for commissioned art for this project now. That's so great. We can't very well change the tone of a thing after the artwork's already done and paid for. Right? Yeah. So that can't happen. So literally the nature of this project is significantly different than the last project because of some of those elements. The desire to create a better quality product, the desire to have certain things in place requires much better back of the house budgeting, planning, and all of those things. Because unlike our last project, this is not PDF only. This is something that we will also be producing print versions for those who back at those levels. The ability to do that means we have to be much more specific on and take much more care with a lot of the details than we had to initially on the other one. We still got to a very precise detail on the last project. That's why it came out. That's why it was good. That's why we've had great reviews on the product as a whole. Mm-hmm. But this time around, we just have to do a lot of that earlier to continue that trend.
Yeah, printing is a whole other monster. Because how stuff looks on a PDF on your computer screen does not necessarily translate at all, like layout, color, all that stuff to a print. So that's a big undertaking. So I want to get into the Kickstarter here, but I want to give Tier, do you have any questions for the crew about?
No. I mean, we've been edging around the new content for the Kickstarter. Like, oh well, this is what it's going to happen. This is where we're at. But we haven't mentioned anything about it.
A little bit of this.
I think we've teased people long enough. I think it's now it's time to talk about this.
Right. As they say in my reaction videos, let's get into it.
The Traveler's Guide to Factions. That's what you guys are doing. So give us the. So who wants to give us the 50,000 foot view of that? Any volunteers?
You got it, Josh?
All right. Yeah, I got it. Yeah. So the Traveler's Guide to Factions. So the kind of the running joke among the three of us is that the Traveler is this mysterious multi-planar being who kind of writes these guidebooks for people that want to explore the multiverse. They have some sort of some arcane knowledge and some sort of whacked out view of history and time and everything like that. So the Traveler is kind of this like running NPC that has secretly run our books. We've always made the joke that the Traveler is a three-headed dragon and none of the three heads can ever agree with each other because that very much kind of describes our creative process, right? But the Traveler's Guide to Factions contains 9 factions. It is a largely rule agnostic. It's going to have some mechanics in it, but it's largely rule agnostic, lore heavy set of factions that the design is that in any campaign, any system, any time period, you can take a faction that you like and drop it in, and each faction comes with just a tremendous amount of lore and background about the nature of the faction and how that faction is structured and what the people in that faction, how they function and everything like that, but also has a lot of content on, if you're taking a particular faction and you're going to run it in a game based in the Bronze Age, here's how to go ahead and do that. Or you're going to take it into like a Victorian steampunk game, here's how to do that. Or if you're going to play like a near future or a far future sci-fi game, here's how you drop it into there, kind of giving them this view throughout time, and so it's not just tied specifically to a particular fantasy setting or anything like that. The mechanics that we are putting into the early stages of the book are going to be 5e compatible, but we're specifically not fantasy 5e also. Like, they can be portable to other 5e systems, like Everyday Heroes, which just came out on Kickstarter a little while ago. That's a 5e engine. There are other games that are built on the 5e engine that are not specifically fantasy, and we're hoping that these factions work well with all those too, with the lore that we're putting into the back of it. So
now I'm gonna take a stab at something here. So a year ago, when you did this other Kickstarter, it was specifically 5e based, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah,
it was very much 5e based. Yeah,
it was. What happened in the past year that may have maybe had you drift away from really going all in into 5e? Is there anything that happened? Anything that changed?
So everybody knows about the OGL kerfuffle. Yeah, everybody's familiar with the giant hand of WotC coming down and trying to crush our creative community, and how all of that went. And little background, that happened as we were trying to finish our last Kickstarter. So now suddenly we might not be able to put it out. We'd been paid. Our Kickstarter was completed, but we had not yet delivered. So that was a very, very rough time of uncertainty for us. And we came out of that a little jaded. I like to say that nobody can ever take D&D from me. I've been playing it since I was 8 years old. It's as much a part of me as it is as any other role-playing game ever could be. And honestly, I feel that I own D&D more than WotC does. But WotC's definitely kind of given us a little bit of a sour taste in our mouth and made us look at creating content for other games and to create content that can be compatible with 5e, because there's some great games like Tales from the Valiant and Daggerheart coming out hopefully soon that will give us another 5e avenue that's not handing our dollars to WotC, but also to expand, because we're expanding. I'm really getting into Savage Worlds. We've been playing some Powered by the Apocalypse. And we want to write for those systems too. So we're definitely headed in that direction. Right now, what we know best is 5e. So that's why, as we say, when we do the mechanics, they will be 5e compatible, but with the ability to port them into any other 5e system. But we wanted the factions to be system agnostic, so that if you're playing a post-apocalyptic future Road Warrior style game, you could still take one of them, drag it and drop it, use some of our suggestions on how to change it to make it fit that type of game or genre, and run with it. I mean, to be fair, you're going to get one snapshot of our clearest vision of it, but then you're going to get, if you're going to move this to a dystopian setting, a modern setting, etc., you're going to get guidance on that. So it was important to us, because of the OGL kerfuffle, to not separate ourselves from D&D and 5e, but definitely show that that's not all we're doing, because it's not what we wanted to do anyway. We were already doing, and Tier's going to get into some of them if he hasn't yet, a lot of indie games and Kickstarter games that we were bringing them in and doing interviews from the creators, and we were actually playtesting their games with them. And this is already the direction we wanted to go. WotC just gave us a reason to get off our lazy bums and do it
a little faster.
Yeah. And when we talked last time, like, we talked a lot about some of the other games that we've all played mutually, like Rifts and Star Trek and things like that. And in our group, I think I'm one of the folks that really tries to push us to okay, it's like, D&D is great, I love it, it's always going to be in my heart, but there's so many other games out there for us to try. So I'm going to maybe encourage you guys, Free League has open license to maybe try some of that stuff because there's a better chance that I'll try it because that's kind of my golden child right now is Free League. But we talked to Chaosium at Gen Con, and
I saw that. That was a good one.
Yeah, it was great. They were great to talk to, and they handed us the basic role playing book, and Matt's gonna read through that and hopefully do a review. But so and they're going all open license too with the work license and Paizo, of course. So there's the options are out there for you to develop content like what you're already doing, but kind of if you wanted to focus it on the orc license or the Year Zero engine or something like that, you have this huge opportunity now, and not only opportunity, but you have some motivation.
Yeah. So there's a bit of there's a bit of a secret sauce here, and I'll give you guys, because we love you and we want your audience to have. When we do these meet and greets with our podcast family, we try to give every group a little something special, a little something extra. So folks listening will go to all of our little spots here, there, and everywhere and meet everybody. So the piece that I would sprinkle into this particular podcast is this. Not all of the games that we want to write for are completed yet. So as we're writing, we decided early to do system agnostic, just like we've spoken about. We decided that 5e is going to be our base rules, but it's going to be separated in the way that shows up. I'm not exactly sure in the exact layout just yet. That hasn't been completed. But generally speaking, the idea is in any given chapter, lore, and then there's going to be a page or pages with stat blocks and specific rule sets for 5e. We currently have a stretch goal that will include stat blocks and specific rule sets for Tales of the Valiant. Because as we know, they're currently configured, Tales of the Valiant has the most open, you can publish anywhere you want type of rule set. Almost everybody has something that would allow us to create for them, but some of those avenues are still a little structured or specific. Like you can only do it here. There's a specific license you have to go get, or a specific set of forms you have to do. You can do it here, but you can't do it on Kickstarter. So there's still a little of that going on. None of it to kill creativity, but a lot of it does steer where you can go. So the idea here is we're going to do the base lore, the base 5e rules, at least if we hit that stretch goal, the TOV rules. Future projects might include stretch goals with other rule sets as well. But for right now, this project, it's just those two, because those are the two. I was an early backer for Tales of the Valiant, so I have access to all of their pre-building content. And when we get to by the time we get to the point of fulfillment, we'll have the ability to produce those rules, because it's also 5e based. It's very close, but there are some specific things that'll be different. So we'll be able to make those adjustments from our base to that pretty easily without greatly expanding our timeframes. That's kind of the goal, so we can meet our goals. Future projects will have other things, other stretch goals, where we'll be able to do that. Or we will just have separate books that we sell in those other avenues, those other locations that utilize the lore, but here's the rule set. So it won't be, those projects won't be as robust as far as page count, but it'll be, here's our book for the rules. Here's the player pack or the GM pack for the stat blocks for this other game system. That's kind of what that's the ecosystem we're looking to build within Tabletop Journeys over time. This is our first foray into that, and I have nothing but success in mind, or in my thoughts, because I think it's absolute win. People play multiple games. Your group plays multiple types of games. If you have a faction that you really like that's in this book, and you think, yeah, this would be great to have in our Aliens game, I really want to have the Soul Society. I think they could be as cool as Burke was in the second Aliens film. I want that. Now you can do that, right? We don't have those free league rules just yet, but you've got something where you can make it up for you as you go, and some future project we might be able to do that ourselves, depending on, like I said, those specific avenues and methodologies that you have to use. That's the long-term goal overall. But in the interim, we're going to set it up in a way that allows any player, any storyteller to take it to any game or game system or time frame that they want, as long as it's appropriate to the table they want to run.
That's great. I mean, I backed a Kickstarter a while back for the Hellboy RPG, which is 5e based. Yep. And just having this discussion right here is already making me think of how I can incorporate factions into a game like that. It has nothing to do with fantasy and it absolutely could work.
Yep. A faction is a small society, effectively. It's a small ecosystem of people with a common belief, and they can be applied even when they sound, something sounds really fantasy, like the Hands of Providence, which is one of our factions. That society could work really well in a fantasy-based game. Effectively, it's fortune tellers and future-sighted people who move around with a common view of the future, nudging events to make their future come to fruition. Or it can also be moved into a more modern setting. You just got to change its look and feel a little bit, and you've got the show Person of Interest with the two machines, the Machine and Samaritan, and their agents on the ground, and how much they were competing to change the world, which is a television show if you haven't seen it. Or you could move it into a futuristic state, and you just change the outside layer, because that's all it is. That's just what it's dressed up for, whether or not it's dressed for fantasy or dressed for sci-fi or dressed for post-apocalyptic. You just change its outfit and it's ready to go.
Yeah. I got a little preview of some drafts you're working on. And so can you talk to like the building blocks that make up these factions? I think that'll probably help folks get a better understanding of what's going to be in the actual Kickstarter. Like take one faction. What are the building blocks that go into it?
Glenn, you want to do the breakdown since you are one of the primary architects of the format?
So basically, when we decided we were going to run with the concept of factions, one of the things, and hey, this bounces back to that lessons learned category. One of the things we learned in our last project is that if everybody says, let's write subclasses, and runs off into their own corners and writes in isolation, what comes back will not match.
Yeah.
At all. So everything will have to be fully reinvented to have a cohesive flow. So we started out right off the gate this time going, that's not okay. We need a template. It doesn't have to be the exact same for every faction, but we need some basic building blocks that are going to make up the scaffolding. And then each one can have window dressing or extra sections or subsections that give things specific to it. And as we were doing that, we did a lot of research. We went through faction creating stuff from 5e, from other systems, like the Adventure League Guide to Factions, which is a short like 5 or 6 pager about the Harpers and things like that, was one of the things we were looking at. We went through a lot of material and we started picking up the pieces of, okay, that seems really important and integral to defining what a faction is. We have to have that, and built a template. So each faction should start with a general blurb, like a summary you would get at the beginning of any adventure or anything else. It gives you an overview. But then it should dive right into the faction lore. That's going to start out with a long section on its history, how it was established, and some little bits about, its lore, important people, or tactics, or the way that things changed as it goes through. But then right after history, it's going to break down throughout the ages. And we're doing, at the moment, we have 4 definite setting ports that we want to make sure we have available. And one's is a Bronze Age neoclassical early fantasy setting. Renaissance Victorian steampunk setting is the next level. Modern dystopian to post-apocalyptic is the next level after that. And then the sci-fi setting, futuristic setting, or hard sci-fi fantasy setting at the end. We're going to try to give you a snapshot of how you could take what you've seen of the history above and dress it up to fit into those different historic or periods or genres. Each faction will have its own unique symbol or badge, and they're going to be cool. That's the art that we're working on now and going through revisions of, and they look pretty hot. And we're hoping to do some special stuff in the Kickstarter rewards with those symbols. Hoping people pick their favorite faction symbol or faction and symbol to get behind it.
Get a T-shirt.
Yeah, we're going to do a t-shirt, maybe coffee mugs. Each one's also going to have a section on specific beliefs or tenets, and that's where it's going to step away from the history part and kind of give you their mission statement, what they're about in a more concise, specific format, and the different aspects of how that influences them relating to the rest of the world. That'll include things like their goals, their wealth and influence in terms of, whether or not, and wealth levels vary depending on game, but we're going to give you kind of like high wealth, low wealth, medium wealth,
right, yeah.
just as an example, so that based on your economic system, you can insert them in. We'll talk about their strongholds and headquarters, and any services they offer to the rest of the world too, because factions don't usually live just as an island unto themselves, unless they're just an evil faction trying to take over the world, at which point, they're not really offering services beyond convert.
Pain.
And pain, right?
Yep.
Right.
The Seed family from Far Cry 5 comes to mind. They weren't really offering anybody anything.
Offering a can of whoop at.
Right. And we're going to give you anything they've got for rituals, rumors, or secrets, kind of like that. This is the below the surface, less common information about the faction. We'll cover enemies and rivals and favorite tactics. When we get into membership, we'll get into typical members for each faction. We're going to talk about how they possibly how they recruit the people into it, ranks and advancement, so that we can create a possibility for you to let your players be part of them, because we don't want this to just be a storyteller book. We want the players to be able to base themselves in these factions too. And one of our stretch goals is going to be a unique a unique background and feat for each faction to go into that player category. But for members, we'll talk about membership perks, resources, and training, and we're going to throw in character building questions and faction building questions throughout, where when we hit it the appropriate spot, we're going to ask you a question, like if you're working on a character and a background, how does this show up in your current character's history? It's going to ask you direct questions to help you bring it to life. And then we'll hit the actual rules and stats, where we're going to have stat blocks for at least one stat block for each tier for a generic adversary or ally that could appear, and any rules specific to that faction that need to have mechanics will be in that section as well, and then hopefully our stretch goals will expand it from there.
When I get this all edited and published to YouTube, I'm gonna put the timestamp on this section is like, just tell me what this is. Exactly. That's gonna be the title for this section. It's like, because you really nice to summarize what's going to be, the whole construct of each faction, which I think you laid out pretty well there. It was
one of the other things that's going to be included that's right along those lines is, now that we've created that template, and as we go through writing it, our lessons learned are going to go into, it might be the first chapter, it might be the last chapter, but it'll be the last one we write, because we're going to include all of our lessons learned into its final structuring, as we're going to write a chapter on how to create your own faction and fill in all of these pieces from the template.
That's nice.
Yeah. The goal really was, as Glenn said, and I just want to double emphasize this, is to give everybody playing the game something that they can work with. Even if I'm a player and I'm getting ready to play a character, if I'm given a pre-gen, as long as my storyteller is good with the general flavor of this type of stuff, I now can very quickly build a really good backstory, because my guy comes from this, whether it be the Miners Guild or something like that. And it could be one of the 9 that we have. It could be one that I've made up as a player myself, simply for the sake of informing my play at the table. So It is very much a player-focused book, in that you can build a character who comes from one of these. You can build a character whose goal it is to join one of these. You could build a character whose lifelong enemy is one of these, and that can inform how your character interacts with the game world that you're about to play in. Similarly,
and every tie that you make to the faction in your world and your players will bring the faction more to life within your world.
Absolutely.
They can
And
be
as
patrons,
a storyteller, this could be, they could be the patron for the player group. They could be the enemy that the player group is working against. So at first they're fighting those tier 1 stat blocks, those common guys or whatever, when they catch wind of the boss that they deal with in tier 2. And then it's, oh my goodness, this is much bigger than we originally thought. We have to travel to the town at the edge of the kingdom to go after the lieutenant. And then when we beat that, we realized this was just the tip of the iceberg. There's a much larger organization. They have a goal. Now we got to go after the ones at the head. You could take this, one of these factions, and you could build an entire campaign about fighting them, or you could build an entire campaign about rising through the ranks within them. And I love the fact that what we're talking about allows you to do both of those things, either separately or hell at the same time. You could be fighting against one while joining the other.
You could have faction wars if you really wanted to.
That's pretty interesting. I'm kind of distracting myself here because I keep kind of going back and to what Glenn said a second ago about you're putting the basic template in the book out there for folks to create their own factions. Have you thought about having some sort of license for that so that folks could either kind of have their own travelers companions that they could put on drive through or whatever, or take your factions and make their own adventures with them? Have you thought about that kind of thing, just to kind of build on the lore that you're creating and let other people in and to use your lore as a baseline for their own thing?
I mean, we haven't, but that's kind of a fantastic idea.
That's an interesting thought.
Gotcha.
I mean,
gotcha journalism.
My gut off of that. You want to give your gut first, Josh? Go ahead.
On the spot. Yeah. No. Go ahead, Glenn. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
This is great.
Okay. My gut on that is where we are now in our current professional development. We think this book is going to be great, and it's one of the lessons that we're learning, and it's one of the stepping stones along our path. And I think that at this point, I don't think we're quite ready to put out our own licensing. I think that feels like we might be getting a little bit too big for our britches at this point. My gut says that for these factions, and the reason we're including that chapter is because we want people to tell stories, and we want them to create, and we want them to use our method because that's going to draw more people to our brand. And beyond supporting our Kickstarter, we hadn't put a single thought into trying to capitalize or carry that any further. So the moment we would just welcome people to use our system and create factions and tell us about the amazing stories that they told with them, and we're not chasing anybody about rights or anything like that.
Well, I mean, I can honestly say it would be really cool to have a contest where people send in a bunch of the factions, and then we could have our various social media communities. Like we could select like 10, and then just have and then like. And just support people who've created these things in some fashion.
I mean, this has got Itch Jam written all over it.
Yeah, it really does. But at the same time, what we're talking about, at least as far as the lore section, I don't know if that methodology is really copyrightable or licensable. I think we're putting headers in a way, like obviously if we have our content, our IP is our IP, and that obviously I think is already covered. But I think what we're more talking about is here's a way we're telling stories. We invite other people to tell stories in a similar way. And we'd love if you shared that with us so we can see what we can all come up with together.
Put it on a supplement in the Tabletop Journeys magazine that comes out once a month.
Exactly, something like that. Like,
Well, I'm showing
we're looking for a producer for that tier. Are you interested?
I gave up writing a long time ago.
No, you didn't. You just stopped putting it on paper. Yeah. That's my version of gotcha journalism right there.
I'll tell you where this is coming from. We're kind of in the outer orbit of the Mork Borg crowd, and they have this open license, and they do a lot of itch jams and things like that, where they're taking their stuff and they've created this community that keeps on growing and has all these other little mini mini satellites and orbits that different people are kind of creating for. And it's kind of gotten bigger, a lot bigger than the actual Mork Borg creators. It's this whole thing now. So I don't know if that whole process is that was maybe just a one-time thing. But if you could somehow capture that lightning in the bottle, what you create here, if you kind of keep going down this route, it could just end up being a lot bigger than you, and you could actually help create other communities through what you're doing. So I don't know.
That's a really cool idea. I love that idea and concept.
It is caused wheels to spin. It is not something we thought about
definitely
before this moment.
And got everything turned.
Good job, Nathan.
But I mean, we've always been about building community. We say it,
100%.
Tyr, you've probably heard it 15, 20 times just with what you've listened to. We're about building this community. We're about getting more people to the table, sharing more stories with more people and that. So I definitely think that if something we're doing becomes an even bigger and better vehicle for that, we're definitely going to find ways to make sure we can expand that and make that even better. I definitely think there's ways to do that would be very cool. I'm not sure what that avenue would look like. I'm not sure how that works. I'm not a lawyer. Don't even play one on TV, though I have played one in a couple of tabletop games. But
you don't have to pass the bar for that.
Yeah, you really don't. Well, besides, the bar is usually a little bit taller than I am at 5'3", so
I know you can't even reach it.
I can't even get on that ride. So
Lee Winnicke's never passed the bar as long as I've ever known him. So I mean that's
right. He just pulls up a stool.
Ouch. And grabs a microphone. But neither here nor there.
I got to tell you, every game that I have played with factions, going all the way back, starting with the old Planescape box set, has added a richness and a depthness to the story world, which they never would have imagined before. I mean, I remember that campaign setting. It wasn't fleshed out as nearly as much as it could have been, except the factions did it. The way I GM'd it, the way the story developed. Those factions were integral part of that world and how the characters interacted with them, whether or not they chose to be part of the factions, whether or not that we had, characters just starting in that world who was just learning about them from the outside, and the rumors here and the scuttlebutt there, and meeting some of the lower tier members, and then getting then later on getting an idea of like the bigger movements within the world. It adds so much color to the tapestry, and I seeing this and being able to use it in any world. Like I said, just talking here, I've thought about 3 or 4 different worlds where I could use these kind of factions, and I think it's going to be a fantastic tool, and it is going to create this world, and you're going to get so much feedback from other storytellers, other players who do this. So I mean, I'm really excited to see how this goes and see where it goes.
So are we. I mean, that's kind of the best part is seeing what happens, right? So yeah.
Yes, and we love it when we get somebody who sends us those stories that tells us how what we wrote or something that we created impacted their table. It's fantastic. And you're 100% right. Even if you have a micro view of the world for lower level characters who haven't even left the Shire yet, having a worldly faction or two inside that community brings the whole world to life. It fleshes the whole thing out beyond the community, and it can really make a difference.
Well, I also look at it like when you take a look at our first book, which was Collaborative World Building, that first book was about how to get players to engage with the campaign world. That was really what that was about. Our subclasses faction was, now how do we create something cool so that players can do these new things and interact with that campaign world in a different and unique way. It wasn't about giving them more power, but it was about covering things that we didn't think were really well covered in current WotC products. The Beast Mind from our last book, from that book comes to mind. I have been a fan of Rangers from years past, and what I really never liked about the base 5e Ranger is I wanted a Ranger to have an actual legitimate animal friend. I did not want it to be a sprite or spirit of nature, which is fine, but that wasn't my vision of a ranger. I wanted Mark Singer with a badass cat and
Poto and Kodo in his pouch.
And Kodo and his bird that flies around and can see stuff. That's what I wanted, right? I wanted Beastmaster swinging his sword, right? And so taking the 5e system and coming up with a way to do that was what we tried to do. So a lot of what went into that subclass book was how do we fill these gaps for things that we want to see at the table that aren't already there. Right. This is that next evolution. Now, how do we enrich the overall story? So people playing in those gaps have an organization they can belong to or work against. And the stories that they've collaborated on are now the backdrop for the characters to act in, and the factions that they act within interact with that whole game world. We are literally doing all of the same things, and each separate project is expanding that to the next logical point, and where do we go from there? And that's kind of what we've been building to is this. And in fact, some of the things that are appearing in this project and some of the things that will appear in our next project are things that started 2 and 3 projects ago that were too big for what we were doing. Hold on to it. We'll do it a little bit more a little bit later. There are a couple factions that will not appear in this project, that simply because they need to be their own thing, because that faction also includes a subclass, also includes all these other things. It's a whole book unto itself. Right. So there are future projects.
I got at least one of those.
I think we're at.
I think 2. We might have 2, but I know we've got one.
2 right now, but I know we have one that's really tight and it won't take long after this completes before that's ready to go, but that's kind of what we're doing. We just want to expand what can be done. All of those things that you're seeing in all these other games, that's what we're seeing. And we're even seeing like those games that have those great licenses that we can sit back and we've already got ideas for, that little blurb. That's how you translate it to this type of world.
Yeah.
6 months from now, a year from now, we can go back and do just that piece for that other game. That's kind of what we're looking at, and that's really exciting. That gets me jazzed. It has me waking up at night sometimes looking for a notepad or scratch pad so I can jot down ideas and then put it in a folder for 2 projects from now when we're ready to hit that. That's kind of how excited I get about this stuff.
Yeah, you talked about a bit about that last time we spoke. That you're just building this backlog library of ideas that when it comes up for a project, you say, "Oh, you know what? I've got something for that," and then you go to your manila folder or whatever you use to store those ideas.
Google Drive now, by the time when we were talking with you last year, they were literally in manila folders that are in various places and stuff, or worse yet, like little scratch papers that were actually in books on my game shelf, so that when it's time for that project, I just go to the book in question and I pull it out. I'm like, okay, that's the page, that's the idea, and then start from there. But yeah, I'm trying to get a little more digital.
Well, congratulations. Welcome to the 21st century. So
we dragged him in. Yeah.
Finally.
Kicking and screaming.
Yeah. And these are coming from my 2 friends who laughed at me when I finally broke down and got a cell phone in like 2008 or whatever it was, because I avoided having one for a very long time.
Did you still have the pager?
No, I never did. I didn't even have a pager. I was actually, generally speaking, did not want to be contacted. I worked in a call center. I talked on the phone for a job. My golden rule at the time was, unless you're paying me about $20 an hour, don't talk to me on the phone. That was my golden rule. I just don't want to talk on the phone. And even now, if it's not these 2 cats, I am rarely on the phone.
Yeah, we have this get together every year. We probably talked about this last year, but we have this get together every year. And one of the guys is coming, is bringing his son this time. He's out in Oregon. He's called me a couple times this week, and like it's always right in the middle of something, and like it's like, yeah, I'll call him back eventually. But I'm a instant messenger type of guy. So it's, but he's like a phone call guy. So it's just really weird for me. I can't wait to see him, but and I should call him back, and maybe I will.
Note to self: you've been recorded now. Once he listens to this or sees this episode, you're gonna owe him that phone call.
At some point. Yeah.
Unless, of course, you edit that piece out. I mean,
which is my power.
Which is why I
might not even be here. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm going to tell a really good joke now because if I tell a really good joke in this segment, it'll be harder for him to cut it out. I'm putting him on blast. That's kind of how that. I'll stop.
We know his trigger words on the podcast, so there's a list of 2 or 3 words that we can say that we know that he'll cut it out immediately.
Yeah.
But I'm actually down to the point where I can. There's Matt. Had the trouble saying harvest with the T. He kept on saying harvest. And I took a T sound, an ST sound, and merged it with his harvest. So if you listen to the Endless Harvest, every intro, he says harvest every time, but that's not what he said. That's how anal I've gotten with anything.
So
you can fix it in post.
Yeah. So one editor to another. Yeah, I have learned that with the tools that we use specifically, all word based, which is awesome. As long as a person said a word or said a phrase at some point during a given pod or whatever, I can copy the word elsewhere and paste it in. So I literally am, in many cases, listening to that didn't come out as clearly as I wanted. Did he say that word elsewhere? And then I'll just replace it with the same word elsewhere. And as long as the tone was relatively even, you might not even notice that. And what's funny is I will sometimes be going through and like, okay, and I will leave a mark to myself. I need to replace that if I come across it again. But sometimes I'll forget to go back. And then when Josh does the final sound processing on our episodes, then I come back and do a quality listen, or Glenn will do a quality listen. On that quality listen, I'll catch something that I was supposed to go back and catch. Like, hey, Josh, I missed that. This was one of those ones. Can we just cut that all together at this point? Because it's too late at that point to do the whole copy and paste thing. At that point, it's like, hey, how about we just clip that? Since I missed it.
Yeah. Once you have to do all the processing and the rendering, that takes such a long time. It's like it's kind of hard to unbake that cake.
Yeah. So I do no cake baking. I'm about assemblage of the ingredients. Josh does all the baking.
Well, let's circle back. Is there anything else that you want to talk about regarding the upcoming Kickstarter? Anything we didn't cover?
I think
somebody should probably at least go down our stretch goals.
Yeah,
to make sure everybody knows the extras.
Or like when the campaign starts.
Or when it starts, or any of that.
Really
all they know so far is 9 factions.
Well,
each one will be its own chapter. There's a little bit more information.
So when's the Kickstarter kick off?
Sure. So the Kickstarter starts September 28th. We're going to be running until October 26th. So we're launching at like noontime on a Thursday. We'll be running a few weeks. And that's going to include also, we're working out some details to go ahead and do like a big live show to kind of celebrate the end of the campaign on the Monday before. So watch our social medias for all that. Like we'll be announcing where that's going to be and how to get in there and all that stuff. But yeah, so it's going to be a shorter campaign than last time, but a more ambitious goal. So we're
I'll include all your social media links and the website and everything, and Kickstarter link if you have one. I'll include that in the YouTube.
I will absolutely send that to you.
That's TT Journeys on X, and what is it on Blue Sky?
It's TT Journeys on Blue Sky also. Yep. We're TT Journeys pretty much everywhere. And because the running joke for that is that when Lewanika and I first came up with the campaign, with the idea, for the podcast, totally, like the name was the first thing that came, but www.tabletopjourneys.com was already taken by like someone in Wisconsin who did not want to play ball to go ahead and give us the name. So we became www.ttjourneys.com. And so TT Journeys kind of became everywhere. Like we're TT Journeys on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, we're on, you name it, we're there. So
I'll run down the actual names of the factions because we do have that locked down at this point. Yep. And then Josh, if you want to hit us up with each of the stretch goals, I think that would be a good thing to roll into.
Sure.
Yeah.
So in no particular order, because we don't have the order in which they'll appear just yet, we have the Ember Weavers. We have the Thundersworn.
Mm.
We have the Commonwealth of Records, the Guardians of the Grave, the Hands of Providence, the Outriders League, the Order of the Ivory Compass, the Soul Society, and the Warp and the Weft.
The Warp and Weft. There's not a second the.
Oh, my apologies. The Warp and Weft.
And Commonwealth Records
and
is not the Commonwealth Records. Or the Commonwealth of Records.
Yeah.
Commonwealth
I don't think. Yeah,
I
think you said Commonwealth of Records. It's just Commonwealth Records. Like imagine Empire.
The Commonwealth
Records,
of the
Records.
Yes.
Yeah. So
gotcha.
Yeah. And then sorry, Lee, you broke up a little bit. So you want me to go over the goals next? Is that? Yeah. The goal for the campaign is going to be $3,000 to start. And then we have our first big goal is to go ahead and get more art. We want to go ahead and put more art. We're working with a crew of fabulous artists. And so we want more of their fabulous stuff in our book because we love working with these guys. It's been great. The next stretch goal after that is going to be the backgrounds that we were talking about. Each faction will get a background and feat combination, kind of in the post Tasha's 5e world where the background has a specific feat attached to it. The next stretch goal after that is going to be 3 named NPCs with stat blocks. So each faction is already coming with 1 named NPC. Could be the progenitor of the faction or the head of the faction or just somebody really important in the faction or whatever. Each one comes with 1 in kind of the base offering. We hit that stretch goal. We're going to do 3 more. So for various levels, all that sort of thing. And then after the NPC and stat block tier, that's where our Tales of the Valiant tier comes in. So we're going to do a lineage and heritage in the Tales of Valiant style for each faction. So 1 each for all 9. Go ahead.
As well as TOV treatment for each of the aforementioned stat blocks and details.
Okay.
Yep. So that's kind of our Tales of the Valiant stretch goal. Yep. We have 2 more, and these are the really cool ones. These are the ones that we really hope that we hit, right? So the first one is going to be a adventure starter. The last time that we did the Kickstarter, we did a set of 6 adventure starters. They're like 10 to 12 encounter starters to kick off a campaign. We want to do one of those for each faction also. And then the last one is that Glenn had mentioned that we kind of detail the stronghold and kind of fortress or foundation for each of the factions. The last stretch goal is going to be a custom map playable for VTT for each of the factions, also kind of detailing that stronghold. So that's kind of the highest stretch goal. And then after that,
cool.
if we that gets us up to about 10 grand, and if we go over that, then we'll figure out what we're going to do next. So
we'll come up with something else.
That last stretch goal is a big one because those maps are expensive.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
Yeah, they are.
Well, that sounds great. And what's your kind of baseline entry level PDF version going to run? Have you figured out the price yet? What you're going to start at?
Yep. So we're sticking with this is we talked again about lessons that we learned last time around, right? One thing that we're really big on is community copies, right? So when you back the Kickstarter, the base offering for the book for the digital copy is going to be $20. The last book came out at 186 pages, so $20 for 186 page PDF is a really good price, we thought. And without questions asked, we do have a kind of limited number of community copies available where you can back at half price just to get you a copy of the PDF. And then you can, as an add-on, you can buy more copies to put into the community kitty or whatever. So we have options for that too. But the digital copy is going to be $20. The physical copy of the printed book is going to be $50. And then we also have like a retail tier and an early bird tier. So if you back in the first 24 hours, you get a 10% discount. So.
And speaking of the retail tier, something we haven't talked about yet is because we're doing print. One of the reasons for that is so that this is something that can help support local game stores. Our FLGSs need some love from the content community, content creator community. And so that was one of the things we wanted to do. So what we're effectively doing is creating a tier where a game store can, and this is exclusive for stores, can get multiple copies at a price point that allows them to resell and make money to put Tabletop Journeys books on their stores or on their shelves. So it can be played in their shops, that type of thing. Because I felt a little guilty doing a lot of digital only stuff, walking into my game store and playing games. The fact that our book and the things that we write can be purchased in my local store is kind of cool. So I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of that. And what I'm really hoping is if you're a storyteller and you're out there looking at this and you're talking this up to the folks at your table, you're also talking this up to your local game stores. And it's not about just walking in there and buying some dice because you bought your last few books digitally. It's use a game master might back us. A couple of your players might back us, but if there's folks who don't have the ability to or didn't pick up a community copy, now they can turn around and go to that local game store and spread a little bit of that TTJ love everywhere.
That's really forward thinking. I love that because I do it. I get digital copies of from the podcast, and I still, if it's a game I love and play, I still go to my local. I go down there and I pick up a physical copy because I feel that we use the content, we love the content, we got to support the content.
Absolutely. And our game stores are our history. I mean, I speak specifically a lot about on our show, and they don't sponsor. So they have sponsored individual promotions we've done. We're not specifically sponsored, but I still talk about my local game store a lot because I love those guys. Right. And it'd be wonderful if they sponsored through us. So absolutely. # call your boys TTJ. But at the end of the day, I've been going to that store since 1978. I was not even 10 years old when I first walked through those stores. The original owner, who has since passed, God rest his soul, was an amazing person. I love the man. And
that was awesome. I grew up in the same store.
Yeah.
But Lee Winnicke's story.
Yeah, but I will always, I love telling this story. I walked in that store visiting Connecticut. I lived in New York at the time. My stepdad was stationed on the Groton sub base. So we were there for a ceremony and a turnaround cruise on his sub. And we had an afternoon that was free and it was bored. So he took me to this game store across the river in New London, this little tiny store that had all this stuff. And I walked in and I saw the games, and I saw all the stuff and, picked out a few things. I think it was a book on Roman stuff, if I remember correctly. It was Greek phalanxes. I remember now. I got a little pamphlet on Greek phalanxes because he did a lot of wargaming and miniature gaming. And I remember it wasn't even a game book. It was just a historical book on the phalanx. And so I got that. Years later, like 5 or 6 years later, I came back to Connecticut because my dad got stationed there again, and we lived there for real. And I went into the store, and he remembered me from the first time I walked in. Wow. And even remembered the book that I picked up. And he said, "That's I have amazing. Some other ones like that." And had me from go. Had me from go. So I absolutely love the fact that we are engaging in our content creation journey in a way that allows us to support that kind of story, so that I'm not the only person with that kind of story, that there's some other kid somewhere else, whether it be in Groton, Connecticut, with the new owners of the store, or in Poughkeepsie, Idaho, or that wonderful place that Glenn went to out in the Midwest, near Oshkosh, that he talked about on our show a couple of weeks back. We want to help create those stories.
We love our local stores. Tier and I have the same store now. It's moving, getting a bigger locations real soon. I don't know if you saw that, Tier, but I really want to.
I got to tell you, I cheat on that.
Thanks, love you. Don't sniff glue. Play Merc board. Laugh is law.
Look, I'm polystoryism.
Yeah. Technically, I have like 3, but yeah.
Nice.
But I want to thank you guys for coming in and chatting with us. The comfort level I have with you guys is great. It's just like you sit down, we start talking. Yeah. It's been a year, but hasn't felt like a year since we talked. So
I know
that's just like a great thing.
Well,
so
we talk all the time through Twitter /X. So we're always trading little bits here and there. Yeah. Well, we're on Blue Sky now, so we're
on Blue Sky. We're on
starting to feel a little better.
Yeah, I'm kind of trying out Threads and Blue Sky. I'm probably on Threads a little bit more now the blue
soon
sky,
X might be one of our X platforms.
I hope so.
Yeah.
It needs to go. But again, thank you so much for coming on. Tier, thanks for helping me out in this.
It was honestly a pleasure. Like listening to you guys, talking to you guys. I feel like I'm just I get a lot out of it. I feel like I'm a better storyteller. Just from having these conversations. So thank you guys for so much. And I'm looking forward September 28th. Am I right?
Yep.
Yeah,
September 28th on Kickstarter. I'll be there.
Yeah. All right, man.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Love it.
Awesome.
So
great
guys.
being here.
Have a good night, everyone. I hope you enjoyed
everybody.
listening and watching. Thanks.
Have a great night, all.
Later.